Boruto is no longer in control of his own body, and Momoshiki has the steering wheel, and I have evidence to prove it. See, because while Chapter 26 might have seemed like a boring political snooze fest to a lot of you, I believe some of the most important reveals ever displayed in Boruto's 2 Blue Vortex were actually sneakily rolled out in this relatively seemingly low-key chapter. See, because while Boruto and Itajin and Kashin Koji's conversation might have seemed, well, I guess a bit rocky, I believe that not only the way that Boruto answered some very crucial questions may just prove that if Momoshiki isn't completely in control of Boruto's body, he's at least got a foot in the door. But what is my evidence for this absolutely insane claim? Well, today we're going to be getting into all that, because today we're talking Momoshiki is already in charge. But before we get to breaking down on how Boruto Otsutsuki has become even more Otsutsuki than he was before, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. The puppy of the day is Kitty Soft Paws. We called her that because her paws are soft. I mean, technically all of their paws are soft because they're puppies, but also because she's a girl, and there's not that many female characters in Shrek. If you want to help finding her a forever home, you can find my 4th wall in the description below. Yeah, unfortunately, there wasn't as many F words as I wanted to get you down there, but still, Naruto reaction series. Additional video every week. We get into all that today. I want to talk about a favorite recurring sponsor to the page, Factor. Listen, living an active and healthy lifestyle is not easy when you become an adult. Work, pets, relationships, dogs, kids, they all pile up on top of you, and the last thing you can think of some nights is prepping an entire healthy meal. That's where Factor comes into play. Honestly, if not for Factor, I probably wouldn't have eaten today. See, Factor gives you mealtime flexibility that stops you from needing to lean on your quick and easy cheat meals. Throw a Factor meal in the microwave for 2 minutes and you're done. Now you're fueled with food that supports your active lifestyle in a time frame that fits your busy lifestyle. See, I am currently keeping 8 puppies alive, and I don't know if you know this about puppies, but they require a lot of your time. Tie that into starting a business, running 4 YouTube channels, and I don't know, sleeping sometimes, and the idea of needing to run to the grocery store, prepping an entire meal, cooking it, and then cleaning it all up is impossible. But there's never been a better time to start with Factor than right now, as they're doubling the size of their menu to 80 plus rotating meals every single week. That's 3 times more weekly meals, with more chef-crafted restaurant quality meals for you to choose from. They're adding 2 times more seafood options, including meals with salmon, shrimp, and barramundi at no additional cost. They're adding 2 times more high protein meals for those of you trying to crush your macros. And if you're picky about your proteins, well, they're adding in a new protein customization option. Don't want pork, but want beef? Cool. Factor can make that happen. And the swap is completely free. But there's a big difference between telling you and showing you. So let's head down to the kitchen and cook up a meal.
Today we're gonna be cooking up one of Factor's gourmet meals, sesame teriyaki filet mignon.
But just because it's gourmet does not mean it's not cooked the same way. All you gotta do is punch a couple holes, throw it in that microwave that you undoubtedly own, hit the number 2 button and wait. Now that it's done cooking, we add our teriyaki sauce, smother that steak,
And get a big bite with the steak and rice and everything. I don't know how they do it, but the steak is always ridiculously tender, and that teriyaki is the perfect level of sweetness.
So what are you waiting for? Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code TWCFB50 to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's code TWCFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 whole year. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. It's time that your food started to work for you. So in Chapter 25 of 2 Blue Vortex, that being last chapter as of right now, September 29th of 2025, we were left with a cliffhanger of Boruto having a conversation with Momoshiki, asking Momoshiki for his power. This conversation opens up with Momoshiki living in some kind of mental limbo inside of Boruto, hanging lazily on top of the stump of the god tree that was destroyed when he was killed through the combination Rasengan from Boruto and Naruto. That is to say that somehow, someway, Momoshiki has made some mental pocket dimension of the place that he was killed and is now living in there, wallowing in his own despair. However, Boruto gave him a chance to climb out of that despair. See, it's revealed that the real reason that we hadn't seen Momoshiki in 25 chapters is because Momoshiki and Boruto were no longer on talking terms. Momoshiki had resigned himself to the concept of death and understood that one day when Boruto died, he would also die, and that would be sweet, sweet release. However, Boruto came to him and said, if you lend me your powers, those powers are enough to defeat Jura and save the world, I will give my body over to you. And that's how the chapter ends, which is an insane cliffhanger. The kind of insane cliffhanger that you would expect to be paid off in the following chapter, chapter 26. However, nothing. While yes, the concept of a deal being brokered between Boruto and Momoshiki is brought up in a conversation between Boruto, Kashin Koji, and Inujin, a non-answer is given by Boruto. And since we spend no time during this chapter through the POV of Boruto, we don't really know what's going on inside his head. But here's the thing, outside of the fact that there was a crazy Momoshiki-based cliffhanger at the end of chapter 25, there was more reasons than even just that for Momoshiki to play a big role in chapter 26. See, because for those of you who are too busy trying to flip to the peak content that is Boruto and skip the color page that's at the beginning of every single chapter, you wouldn't know that at the beginning of every single monthly release chapter of Two Blue Vortex and part 1 of Boruto, there is a color page that usually depicts a character that plays a major role in the upcoming chapter. And rather curiously, on the color page of chapter 26 of Two Blue Vortex, Momoshiki is shown. But that's odd. You see, because Momoshiki being shown as the character depicted in the color page, and then not being shown in the entirety of chapter 26 would represent the first time that's ever happened in Boruto's entire run. Yes, so far as I can remember, and also as far as I checked, and I checked a lot of chapters, and the entirety of the 106 chapters of Boruto that exist, there has never been an instance where somebody depicted in the color page at the beginning of the chapter has not been shown in the chapter itself. So why start now? To give some examples here, the color page for chapter 25 showed Himawari and Kurama in his chibi form. And by far and away the most important development that we get in chapter 25 is the reveal that Himawari is doing some mental training with Kurama. The color page for chapter 24 shows Kawaki, and chapter 24 heavily revolves around the finishing of the battle between Kawaki, Jura, and Boruto. And last, and certainly not least, the color page for chapter 23 depicts Jura doing some kind of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure stance, and because in the fact that in chapter 23 it's revealed that Kawaki has entered into the battle between Boruto and Jura, I would say that Jura plays a pretty big role in that chapter. So with all that in mind, the idea that Momoshiki was selected as the person to be on the color page for chapter 26, even though he's not shown, should raise a couple of question marks. Why was this very distinctive change made now? Was it a mistake? Was it because Momoshiki played a big role in chapter 25 and is going to play a big role in the future? Or was it possibly because Momoshiki played a big role in this chapter and we just didn't notice? See, no matter how you look at it, Boruto is acting a bit weird in chapter 26. Well, the chapter itself is heavily focused on Shikamaru's political battle against the Fire Daimyo, Sarada and Sumere's feelings for Boruto, and their consequent battle against Daemon. When we do get to spend a little bit of time with Boruto in this chapter, he's being a little aura farmery, even for him. See, Boruto, ever since the time skip, has been incredibly stoic. He entered into the Piccolo/Jinwoo aura farming high school and came back from the time skip a drastically different character than the Boruto who left Konoha behind. See, whether it was re-entering his own story in Two Blue Vortex by using Flying Raijin to land on Code Space, scoffing at Kawaki for his weakness and pondering about how little he trained over the course of those 3 years after easily defeating him, sitting Mitsuki down to have a talk about his feelings and telling him about how Kawaki isn't his true son, or popping in on his two love interests and having a chat with them while overlooking the entirety of Konoha. In chapter 26, Boruto's nonchalantness was a bit extra. See, whether it was how Boruto was leaned up in his throne-like chair in his conversation with Inujin and Kashin Koji, making him look kind of like Sukuna sitting inside of Yuji, or how he conversated with Inujin and Kashin Koji, it is pretty undeniable that Boruto wasn't acting exactly like himself. See, while Boruto hasn't shied away from embracing his role as a villain to those who believe he is one after being affected by omnipotence, him opening the conversation with Inujin, who they just teleported to a space with no doors and no way to escape, by saying, hey, before you try and do anything, there was literally no physical way to escape this room, but don't worry, work with us and then I'll teleport you back to Konoha safely, didn't exactly seem like the way that Boruto, at least the one that we all know, would go about the beginning of that conversation. Like I said, he hasn't shied away from the idea that a lot of people on Earth right now think that Boruto killed Naruto, so he's not necessarily constrained by acting like he has the good guy morals of every anime MC. We as the readers understand that he's a good person, the people unaffected by omnipotence understand that he's a good person, but everybody else on Earth thinks that he's a bad person, and Boruto himself has stated when offered by people like Ada to try and fire off another omnipotence to try and reverse the first one, that he would rather have people hate him than make the situation messier by using a jutsu they don't fully understand. Boruto has even gone so far as to tell Kawaki that he's not going to try and tell anybody that their memories are false, because he understands that omnipotence will rewrite their memories back after a certain amount of time, and also because he understands that splitting people's opinions on their opinions of him could cause conflict. Therefore, like I said, Boruto is really in no rush to try and rewrite the narrative that he's not a bad guy. And therefore we can't necessarily say that because Boruto wasn't being super hospitable to Inogen that Momoshiki must surely be in charge. However, that's just one piece of evidence amongst many, because in this very same chapter we also see Kashin Koji bring up the concept of Boruto trying to broker a deal with Momoshiki, saying specifically, in terms of Momoshiki, you tried to offer him some kind of deal, did you not? And therefore either Kashin Koji and Boruto had a conversation about trying to leverage the power of Momoshiki, or by using the power of the 10 paths, Kashin Koji was able to see that in the majority of the possible futures, Boruto tries to enter into some kind of contract with Momoshiki for his powers. Whatever the case is, Kashin Koji seemingly understands that Boruto is going to try to use Momoshiki's power in the battle against Juro, and therefore, in order to ensure that Boruto is able to acquire the level of power that possibly Kashin Koji and Boruto talked about getting from Momoshiki, or because Kashin Koji was trying to verify that the present that they're in right now is one of the futures that he saw where Boruto tries to work with Momoshiki to defeat Juro, he tried to confirm as to whether or not Boruto was working with Momoshiki. And the answer that Boruto gives us is not really an answer, and Kashin Koji himself says that. As when pressed on the matter of whether or not he entered into a contract with Momoshiki, Boruto simply says, I will hold up my end. But why would Boruto answer like that? See, if we're being entirely real with ourselves, Boruto at this moment in time has every reason to be upset with Kashin Koji. Well, obviously, we all want Boruto and Kashin Koji to have the Jiraiya-Naruto relationship we think they could have. Kashin Koji is not Jiraiya, and Boruto is not Naruto. Well, yes, kind of like how Boruto and Kashin Koji are being chased down right now by the entire world who believe that Boruto killed Naruto, and they're even being chased down by an iteration of the Akatsuki in the form of the Shinju, kind of like how Naruto and Jiraiya were running from the Akatsuki during their time skip. That's pretty much the only similarity between Naruto and Jiraiya and Boruto and Kashin Koji. While Naruto might have looked at Jiraiya as a father figure, Boruto looks at Kashin Koji as an annoying, necessary roommate. And that's probably because Jiraiya didn't have the ability to see the future, and therefore Jiraiya was never put into a situation where he had to withhold what he knew about the future from his pupil. But that is the case for Kashin Koji. See, Kashin Koji specifically has to withhold what he knows about the future from Boruto, because the more that Boruto knows about the future, the more that he's able to change, and thus Kashin Koji's predictions would change and become less accurate. And therefore, it's up to Kashin Koji and Kashin Koji alone, apparently, to guide Boruto and the rest of humanity to the best possible future. However, Boruto seemingly proved in his battle against Juro in the Land of Wind that he'd be able to achieve futures that even Kashin Koji's 10 paths had not predicted, or at least had not predicted yet. And thus, idealistically, Boruto and Kashin Koji clash, with Kashin Koji trying to steer Boruto towards his best possible future with information that only he has access to, and Boruto demanding access to that information so he can possibly try to find a better future than even the best case scenario that Kashin Koji envisions. But this idealistic clash came to a head just a couple of chapters ago when Boruto used Flying Raijin to jump into battle against Juro to save Konohamaru, somebody that Kashin Koji was going to allow to die. And as Konohamaru, even though he is affected by omnipotence, is essentially Boruto's big brother, if there was one person that Boruto probably didn't want for Kashin Koji to allow to die for the cause of the greater good, it was, well, probably Sarada, but Konohamaru is pretty high on that list. And therefore, while Boruto's attitude for the entirety of chapter 26 could simply be boiled down to a teenage boy being upset with his mentor, who was actively trying to manipulate Boruto into allowing a situation to unfold that could have led to the death of Konohamaru, one of the most important people on Earth to Boruto. And therefore, Boruto's pouting and curt responses to Kashin Koji could be less about Momoshiki taking over his body and more about Boruto just being pissed that he has to continue sharing space with Kashin Koji. However, the combination of how chapter 25 ended, how Boruto treated Kashin Koji and Inogen, and the fact that Momoshiki was on the color page of chapter 26 has me and a lot of other people thinking that maybe that cliffhanger we were left with at the end of chapter 25 was less a cliffhanger and more a reveal. And the reason we didn't see any more of Boruto and Momoshiki's conversation in their mental plane is because that conversation is over and a deal has been struck. But Nick, you ask, if Momoshiki was already in charge of Boruto's body, wouldn't things be like way worse? Wouldn't he be trying to destroy the world? Wouldn't it be more obvious that Momoshiki was in charge? Well, no, because if we're being real with ourselves, I don't think Momoshiki is fully in charge of Boruto's body. What I believe we're seeing in chapter 26 is actually some kind of hybrid Boroshiki form, a form where neither Boruto or Momoshiki is 100% in charge of their body, and rather their bodies being controlled in more of a Captain Hoshino wearing his number 10 suit kind of way, where two consciousnesses are inhabiting one body, and therefore the personality traits of both are being displayed. But out of all the possibilities, that sounds the most ludicrous, and I acknowledge that. But if we're going to acknowledge moments in this chapter that feel like Momoshiki is in charge, we also have to acknowledge the moments where it feels like Boruto is in charge. See, because yes, obviously Boruto opening his conversation with Inogen, telling him that there's no way that he can escape, but if he's a good boy, he'll send him back to Konoha unharmed, feels like Momoshiki. Boruto turning to Kashin Koji and saying, hey listen, I know you don't like my attitude, but I don't like your attitude either, because you're always leaving out inconvenient details about what you see from your future plans. Like how many people were actually supposed to die in that mission in the hidden sand. And this is something that he says word for word. Boruto openly, in front of Inogen, scolds Kashin Koji for withholding information from him that possibly could have led to the death of Team 7 and 2/3 in their battle against Ryu and Matsuri. And this not only does not feel like the kind of thing that Momoshiki would not be worried about, but also definitely doesn't feel like the kind of thing that Momoshiki would bring up. Sure, maybe you could make the argument that Momoshiki's trying to act like Boruto, but that's ridiculous. And therefore, while in this chapter we can acknowledge that Boruto's acting weird and mean and acting like he's better than Kashin Koji in a high and mighty kind of way, we also have to acknowledge the fact that there is glimmers of Boruto in this chapter. The boy who's more concerned about his friend's well-being than really anything else. But what does this mean? Where does it leave us? Well, if you think back just a little bit, towards the end of part 1 of Boruto, it became clear to us ever since Momoshiki forfeited the last 18% of his upload to save Boruto's life, Momoshiki and Boruto were able to communicate in some kind of mental plane, establishing that not only was their connection deepening, but also that their consciousnesses were slowly but surely melding, which allowed for the two of them to have conversations whenever Momoshiki or Boruto really wanted, kind of like how Himawari is able to mentally train with Kurama by meditating, but also deepened Boruto's ability to use his karma marking reliably. However, over the course of the time skip, we understand 1, because Momoshiki shut himself away, and 2, because when Boruto used the karma marking, he felt as though Momoshiki was going to take him over and therefore kill him, essentially. The two of them split, with Momoshiki sulking in some kind of mental plane and Boruto being too afraid of Momoshiki to try and use the karma marking, and therefore the relationship halted, kind of at the end of part 1. However, it has been 3 years. Boruto is now 100% Otsutsuki, and there is very little barrier between Momoshiki and Boruto. See, because the karma marking isn't really a seal, in the same way that a tailed beast is sealed inside of a Jinchuriki. There's no gate separating Momoshiki and Boruto. Kind of like how, until the learning of Kurama's name and the unlocking of KCM2, Kurama was locked up inside of Naruto. Boruto doesn't have that relationship with Momoshiki, which is why Momoshiki was able to take over his body kind of willy-nilly. The only thing holding back Momoshiki from taking over Boruto's body was 1, the drug that weakened the power of the Byakugan, and 2, Boruto's own mental fortitude. However, now that Boruto is no longer taking that drug and also has dropped his mental walls on Momoshiki, there's really no reason for us to assume that the two of them aren't cohabitating inside of Boruto's body, similar to how Naruto lived with Kurama inside of his body after the unlocking of KCM2, with Kurama saying after that moment when Naruto was an adult, the two of them share one mind and one body. And therefore this precedent has been set that 2 souls can live in one body. And while I'm not going to outright say that Kurama was ever in charge of Naruto's body, we have seen Kurama be able to separate himself physically from Naruto's body, whether that's creating a chakra avatar that fights against giant golems on the moon, or simply extending a ghost-like tendril out of Naruto's stomach to talk to Kawaki while Naruto is asleep. 2 powerful souls can absolutely coexist in the same body. But even if that is the case right now, and Boruto and Momoshiki are sharing one brain, is this how their relationship will pan out forever? Or will the control of Boruto's body switch over to Momoshiki 100% after the defeat of Jura? Well, we can't say for certain. However, the idea of Momoshiki willingly sharing a body with Boruto and therefore not being able to go on his tirade of destruction does seem relatively unlikely. See, I could see some kind of agreement being struck between Boruto and Momoshiki, where Boruto says up until Jura is defeated, the two of us will work together. That way I can ensure that your power is directed toward Jura and not towards things like Konoha, but after Jura is gone, I will cede control of my body over to you in its entirety. This would not only allow for Boruto to acclimate to Momoshiki's power, whether that be increasing his chakra or his proficiency with Kama marking, but it also makes a lot of sense for Momoshiki. Because Momoshiki, if we're being entirely honest, would have absolutely no intrigue in sharing a body with Boruto. He's established that multiple times. He's tried to get Boruto to give in to grief so that Boruto could give up his body over to Momoshiki and essentially live his life like Megami at the end of JJK, and when that didn't work, Momoshiki pouted literally so hard that he was ready to die. Now, rather obviously, neither of those scenarios are real heavy on the concept of sharing, and therefore if Momoshiki was currently sharing his his body with Boruto, you'd assume that he would only do it because there was a promise made that at some point in the future, if Juro was defeated, he wouldn't have to share any longer. But then again, who knows? There's also just the possibility that Boruto was being moody, because this is his first time seeing Kashin Koji since Kashin Koji tried to withhold information from him that literally would have got Konohamaru killed. But what do you guys think is happening? Do you think Boruto and Momoshiki are sharing a body, or do you think Boruto's just being moody? Let me know in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, I can kind of do it for me. Hold up, wrong side. Like the video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, this kitten's got to go back to bed.